Well, episode 3, we're back again and taking advantage of some cool down here in Nebraska. We actually have some good temperatures, and it was too nice to try to do this inside, so we figured we'd come outside and figure out a spot to do it and get some beautiful tasseling corn in our background, and got some over in front of us as well. I know not everybody can see it, but it's nice to see those kind of things, right?
It is. It really is. Waking up to a good old Nebraska sunny, cool morning, and like you said, the corn's tasseling here, and it's hard to believe. It seems like we're on time right now. So.
I know for as late as everything got planted, there's most everything's doing really well.
Yeah.
I know there's some guys that don't have some stuff in the field, but what's in there, in the majority of it looks absolutely amazing.
Right.
So good news is corn's up, beans are up, cotton's up, wheat's up, cattle are up. So everything seemed to be working out so far. So hopefully those trends keep pushing up.
Gotta love it, and hopefully it keeps going north.
So we were sitting around the other day trying to figure out what we were going to do for episode 3. Coming up with topics every week it's challenging, but we got to find something that works. So
I don't know. I think between the two of us, we're windy enough to find things to talk about. So.
Yeah. So I hopped on the old Google machine and typed in ag trends and ag topics, and I found an article from AgWeb, and it was titled AgWeb's Top 10 Mega Trends for Farming.
Right.
So I figured, well, why not print those off, and we'll go over each one of them and give our input or some other input that we got from other people, and just kind of see what it's all about. So,
Sounds good.
Ready to jump into it?
Let's just jump on into her.
All right. The first one is all you. So it's shifting farm structure. It says here, a large transfer of farm assets to younger producers will soon occur. The average farmer is 57 years old, and 30% are over 65. A typical Midwest farm of 2,000 acres could conservatively be worth $10 million, just including land value at about $5,000 per acre. The trend towards larger farming is going to slow until it hits its equilibrium. And I know with your financial background,
right,
there's a lot that can go into that transfer. So I'm not smart enough to talk about it. Take it away.
I appreciate it, and this subject is pretty important. The age gap continues to rise, like you had stated, and different demographics. The age group may vary, so this is just an average, but it shows you that it's climbing pretty fast. But one thing that I wanted to mention, or several things I wanted to mention about the transfer of farm operations, is really about structure, and it's really I use the word caution because you really the business, the farmer running a business operation, because that's what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Really needs to lean on their advisors.
Okay.
You can Google all you want, you can do searches all you want, try to do it yourself all you want, but when push comes to shove, you need to lean on your advisors, whether it be an attorney for those estate tax laws, whether it be your CPA, and I say CPA to rely on those tax laws on the books, because the estate laws change, the tax laws change, and it depends on the different administrations we have here in the U.S. And in some circumstances, state by state, they will vary.
Well, and we touched on that a little bit in episode 2 with some of the stuff we talked about there, and I had mentioned some inheritance taxes, if that's what you're doing, if you're transferring it that way, can be up to 30%, and if you just looking at it, 30% of 10 million, that's a lot of money.
A lot of money, and not only do you have an inheritance tax, but you have estate tax laws. What I would like to say, just in short, like I said, lean on your advisors.
Yeah.
Definitely lean on them. But there are ways, if you have a multi-generation farming operation or dealership or business, whatever business it may be, related to the ag industry. There are ways you can start passing via gifting, but let me caution you, you can only gift so much a year.
Yeah. So this
There
needs
are trusts. There are just several avenues that you can pass on and retain ownership.
Yeah. So this is something that needs to be done over a longer period of time. You know, it's not something you want to do going into next harvest season or next year, and you want to stagger that out. From the way it sounds.
For the most part, it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
No. And the beautiful thing about doing something like this, if you do it the right way and lean on your advisors, this can all be done privately.
Yeah.
It does not have to be public knowledge like it would be if you did not do your planning.
Well, that wouldn't be farming though, because everybody knows everybody's business,
Exactly.
right?
So let's keep something private for once.
Right. There you go.
Amen.
Well, let's move on to number 2, acceleration in technology. And I know we kind of again touched on this, a little bit in last week's episode, but it says here, data analysis in the years ahead will supplement what farmers know intuitively, and in some cases challenge those assumptions. New products rely on aerial satellite imagery, greenness sensors, soil maps, millions of weather data points. The question of data ownership will be the subject of growing debate.
That's big.
It is, and a lot of people don't realize that your farm's data is like your social security number. It's how it's identified, and obviously you can access a lot of things via a social security number.
Or it can be equivalent to real estate ownership.
Correct, exactly the same thing. And we talked last week that family farms make up the majority of all farming operations out there, because you got to know your land, your soil, what pesticides work better in certain areas, and that can vary from field to field, like we talked about before. So there's several products out there that people are using these days to make farming not necessarily easier, but more technological, where they can figure out, okay, let me scan this field and it's going to tell me, how my hybrids are, and when they harvest, it's going to tell them what their harvest report, that kind of stuff is. Well, those products usually have a huge lengthy terms and conditions, right? And unfortunately, we're always in such a hurry that nobody really reads those terms and conditions.
Not so much.
Especially when they're 2 pages or 3 pages worth of stuff.
Right.
Unfortunately, you need to.
Right.
Because that's the big question is so you collect that data. You're flying your drone out there, you have a company come out and you do it. You're evaluating everything. Well, do they have rights to that since they were the ones doing it, or the software that you're using? And it all depends on that terms and conditions and what was in there.
That's a big subject. It
Yeah.
really is. Is everything going to remain private? And like you said, everything is automated driven.
Yeah.
Automated driven. And, really what that comes down to is why everything is automated driven is ultimately, like you said, hell, do you want to read a 3-4 page report? Instead, you have everything automated driven, and ultimately it makes that business owner make a better decision.
Yeah, it does. And one of the articles I was reading about it, there was a guy that started using the program. I forget the name of the program. But he essentially is able to do test plots within his field, and not really take any extra time to do it. He can spray a certain area a little bit different. He can plant a little bit different seed, or give a little bit more moisture here, or whatever it may be, and he can fly the drone over there, or have somebody come out and scan it and tell the difference from the air. He doesn't have to wait until harvest to see how that's performing, differently.
No, and that technology is put on irrigation systems as well.
Yep.
Like you said, so certain amount of, say, fertilizer along with water can be put on a certain, say, 20-acre segment or plot, and then the rest can be something else.
Yeah.
Or you can do whatever equivalencies you want to. So
yeah, so I think there's two things to take away from this topic is protect the privacy of your data and know who owns it. So do a little extra research when it comes time to make that move.
And then again, you say do your research, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. But we have professionals in this industry for a reason.
Yeah. Well,
and I encourage people to do their research.
Yeah.
But rely on your professionals. It's going to save you money in the long run.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely, and you definitely want to, rely on a professional. But at the end of the day, you're still making that decision.
You're in control.
So pulling your professionals is a part of your research, is what I was getting at.
Oh, sure.
So yeah,
definitely.
absolutely.
You bet.
Because there's always going to be somebody that knows more than you do about a certain thing.
But of course.
Yeah. All right, the next one is kind of a little controversial topic.
It is.
I'm excited to get into it a little bit, but biotechnology strategy evolves. So we're talking about GMOs, and it says here GMOs are here to stay, but face political and public relation hurdles. In such states as Vermont, where labels are required, implementation is expensive. Yet some GMO advocates back a federal label solution that would halt state efforts. The industry can benefit by helping turn public opinion. So you get on the internet and it's GMO versus non-GMO, what it means, etc. So I actually reached out to a very bright young man who's a graduate student at the University of Iowa.
A scientist, right?
Well, kind of, yeah. He's going for animal science and nutrition.
Okay, well.
Kid's name's Devin Jacob. And I asked him, I'm like, what are your thoughts on GMOs? And I'll read what he sent me, and we can kind of go from there. So he says, well, without GMOs, there's no way we'll ever be able to yield enough cereal grain, fruit, vegetable production to feed 9 billion people by 2050. And he said, really, the whole non-GMO thing is a marketing ploy, because there's only 10 crops that are certified by the USDA to even use genetic altercation. Thus, when you see something like non-GMO orange juice, this is a joke. All orange juice is non-GMO.
Right.
So,
right.
And then it says, as far as GMOs on a health standpoint, there's nothing to be scared of. It's using existing genetics to alter or replicate genes or DNA of that plant. The genetic makeup of the plant may change, but the result is increasing yields, drought tolerance, etc. Those things which we have to have. And truthfully, there's no scientific evidence to prove the fact that there's an advantage to eating a non-GMO product.
Right.
And I also read a study that backed that up, and it said there's billions of GMO product that are crops that are produced, and there's not a single health issue in animals or humans that can be linked to any kind of GMO stuff.
Not any proven facts thus far.
Yeah, and so that's a great debate. I personally will probably stand next to Devin on his assessment to it. I think it's kind of, unfortunately, it is here to stay. And there's farmers that are producing non-GMO products, and they're making their money, and everybody's entitled to their right, their way of life.
Don't you think that comes down to a little more organic? Is that where?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where it's heading. But then again, how do you define organic?
Yeah, I mean
that's
there's so
really
many different phases in developing organic, as far as from what I've read.
Yeah.
So
it's all open to interpretation, and there are companies that are exploiting that, using it for their marketing. So again, trust professionals like Devin in this situation, and make your own assessment from there.
I agree. And one thing you talked about a marketing ploy, and I'm pro that. I favor what you said on that, because, right now something I read which really astonished me is there are 64 countries around this world that require labeling for GMOs.
Yeah.
64 countries. The only exception is Canada.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of shocked me.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll be anxious to see if they pick up on it. I know we'll probably touch on it here in a little bit, but I know China has reduced their regulations on GMO product.
Yes.
And they're becoming more in favor of them.
Right.
Because let's face it, they got a lot of people to feed over there.
They really do.
You know, and so they're going to need the high yields and drought tolerance, that kind of stuff that we're going through right now and pushing.
Yeah, and
So-
we're going to be talking about some other subjects coming up about why China will be affected so much
Yeah.
on this subject too. So,
Yep.
good point.
All right, the next one, and this one's kind of a subject that, you know, it's been happening for years, you know, but they're putting a little bit more weight behind it. So agricultural production is becoming more specialized. In 1982, 35% of all farms produced corn, but in 2007, only 22% did because of economy of scale, technology advancements, government policy. Today's farmers have diversified with organic, non-GMO products, and high oleoc,
Aliak.
soybeans, and high starch corn.
Right.
So farmers being diverse in what they do is nothing new. You know, I mean, has it shifted a little bit? Yeah, it has, but the principle has always been there. You know, I know there's a lot of guys now that are maybe doing a little bit more irrigated alfalfa. You know, they're baling their straw and selling that kind of stuff 'cause it's another source of income. But you know, you always have your same type of farmers. I feel you have your
Same classes of
yeah,
farmers,
you have your row crop corn, soybean guys, and then you know they might do a little bit of wheat in there as well. But you have your guys that raise corn and soybeans and do cattle, you know, and that kind of stuff. And now you're seeing guys that are doing, you know, depending on their, you know, where they're located at, they're doing corn and beans and sweet taters and, you know, pumpkins, that kind of stuff. So they are diversifying it, and that's good. I mean, diversity is a good thing. But I'll tell you this, you know, a lot of the people that I have worked with over the last few years have been in the South, and we all know the South is cotton country,
Yes.
right? So about 4 or 5 years ago, the cotton market was rough. It took a tumble. You couldn't give away a cotton picker to save your life. Well, that's about the time soybeans and corn were on the rise. And so there was a lot of guys who went from planting cotton to doing row crop stuff, corn, soybeans,
Yep.
that kind of stuff. Well, let's fast forward 3-4 years. Where are we at now? Cotton's
on the rise again, right?
Well, it's happening. It's
That's where money's being made, man.
it's crazy. You know, in the equipment business, I've seen it, you know, again, 5-6 years ago, couldn't give a cotton picker away. Now you can't keep them in. I had a dealer down south that had 8 roller pickers in stock, had them for 3-4 days, sold 6 of those to South Africa almost instantly. The other 2 were gone by the end of the week to local guys. And we're not talking, you know, $50,000, $75,000 machines. We're talking $300,000 to $400,000. You know, so while diversity is a good thing, I think that you kind of stay your lane a little bit, right? You know, and make sure you're doing your bread and butter and what you've always done. If you need to dabble and try this and try that, and you know, dip your toe in the water. Don't just switch to the next best thing all the time. You know, and stay consistent, because consistency is key in a lot of things.
Consistency is huge, and you bring up a valid point. You know, stay the course. But, you know, in your areas, if you want to diversify, really in your areas or your demographic areas, recognize the need or the market for that product.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, do your homework.
Yep.
Second of all, you know, learn about that product inside and out.
Yeah. Well, you're exactly right there. Where I grew up, about 2 miles down the road was Tim Lambert. He had Lambert Melons.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know how much land he planted to melons, pumpkins, you know, that kind of stuff. But it was insane. And, you know, all the high school kids would work for him in the summertime and pick them, and then they'd go sit at the local Alco or Baumgars or whatever and sell them out of the back of the truck. And it's been a very, very good business model for him, where he's still doing it today, you know, and that was a situation where he found a niche within his area. And he's a farmer just like everybody else.
Yep.
It might go in the ground different. He might harvest it different. You might sell it different. You're not calling a grain broker for watermelon.
Exactly.
But but he's still a farmer, and he found that niche, and it works.
It exactly does. It exactly does.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, by diversifying and really learning the ins and outs of a product and so forth, talk to other producers around the country. You can really learn a lot. By us talking to other farmers or other people in the agriculture community.
Oh yeah.
We really learn a lot. I mean,
absolutely.
And it's just amazing. 1 or 2 points you can take from a person and do more research, and for heaven's sakes, it can really affect your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
all right, next one, number 5. We're halfway through. It says here, more than 40% of the food production increase since 1961 has been accomplished through irrigation, but groundwater supplies aren't infinite. Concerns have grown about the Ogallala Aquifer, which produces 30% of the U.S. irrigation groundwater. If trends continue, the aquifer will be 60% depleted, according to one study. Climate change also poses challenges. Scientists estimate that for each 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit increase in temperature, crop yields drop by 10%.
right.
Well, we're in Nebraska.
Yep.
The Ogallala Aquifer is in Nebraska. So it's always a topic that comes up whenever you're talking about anything Nebraska ag related. You grew up in the well drilling business.
I did.
As a kid, and your family's still in it. I'm sure they have some takes on it, or you have your own opinion. I really don't know enough about it to comment a whole lot, but you know, using some of your old age and wisdom, maybe.
Well, I think the key is we want to conserve as much water as possible because you know, and I'm going to tout on Nebraska a little bit. Nebraska does have the best groundwater in the United States. It's been proven. And one thing I wanted to say is if we put all the groundwater from underneath the ground and put it on top of the ground.
Yeah.
If I can talk
on top
today,
of the soil.
On top of the soil. Thank you. Here in Nebraska, we would have 47 feet of water. Okay, we do have plenty of water, but the key is to conserve the good water.
Yeah.
And there's pros and cons. You know, it can really affect our crops as far as irrigation goes. But we do have local NRDs across the state of Nebraska, and
I know our NRD system, you know, from the parks and some of the hunting stuff that I do is exceptional. They do a very good job.
Most do a very good job, and they are doing a lot better job of education.
Mm-hmm.
And now there are NRDs that I think most have now regulated the amount of irrigation water that can be done, and most have gone to metering irrigation wells. Which is
good.
There's pros and cons of that too. You know, it depends on what side of the fence you're on. But I think it's all good.
So bottom line is, when I yell at my kids to turn the water off while they're brushing their teeth, I need to continue doing that.
I think it might not be a bad idea.
Okay.
And one other point I want to make is a lot of us come from rural areas.
Yeah.
We know where groundwater comes from. If you don't know where groundwater comes from, educate yourself. It comes from the ground.
I like it.
All right.
I like it. All right, moving on here to number 6. Changing commodity environment. From 1980 to 2004, the correlation of corn prices to crude oil prices were 0.35 cents. So from 2005 to 2013, that figure more than doubled to 0.87. Other commodities similarly illustrate the strong relationship between energy and crop prices. Future crop demand growth appears less bullish than in recent years because biofuel demands has largely run its course, although the future demand for soybean exports will remain strong. China, which now buys 2/3 of all soybeans traded, has built a soybean stock levels from virtually zero to about 17% of use. that's going to ease the input appetite a little bit.
Import.
Or import, yeah. Sorry. It's one of those deals, and I think there's ebbs and flows to everything that goes on in the market or even day-to-day life. But I think we're going to have kind of a tough year with soybeans this year. Corn got put in a lot later, so beans got put in a lot later. And I think, everybody was talking about planting corn so late. The corn is obviously recovered. The soybean, I think, is going to get the bad rap for this year. I talked to a guy in Illinois a couple days ago, and asked him how his crops were and everything. He says corn's great, but my soybean stuff is rough. It's about knee high right now. Normally it's waist or better, high, by this point. So I think we live in a supply and demand type economy or world per se, and so we're gonna have less soybeans produced this year.
I think you're right.
And after our next round of export, I think we're gonna use like a third of our U.S. stock in soybeans.
Yes.
Well, what's that tell you though? We're sending out plenty. We're sending out the same amount. We're bringing in less. Supply versus demand. There's going to be more demand than there is supply initially, and so you're going to see those prices creep up, and there might be a big boom. But it's one of those things. I think that there's a false floor there. It'll come back down. There'll be a market correction. So don't hedge all your bets and your future plans on high soybeans, because it could be a 1 to 3 year process, and then it could trickle back down for that typical market correction.
Right. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. It could be, it just doesn't happen overnight, and that's why we're still seeing some uncertainty in the market. And the same thing on the corn side as the soybean side. That ethanol bill was passed.
Yep.
I just wanted to point that out real quick. So we may see a gap widen on that as well, supply-demand theory. I don't care. That theory still works. It'll always work. But that didn't happen overnight. It's not going to happen within 30 days.
Yeah.
It'll take a year or two for that to
absolutely
come into play as well. So just, take a patient pill and just go for the ride.
Yep, absolutely. We're going to shift a little bit on number 7. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that's going to affect our cattle ranchers. It says meat consumption shift. U.S. meat consumption has declined about 7.8% from 2007 to 2013. Meanwhile, China has been the world's top meat consumer since 1992. By 2012, China's consumption more than doubled that of the U.S. China's red meat and poultry consumption projected to rise about 15.2%. The U.S. likely will ship more pork and fewer grains to the country. This is because it's more cost effective for China to import, a finished good.
Yeah.
And it poses a good point. We produce a lot of beef. I know we do export, a fair amount as well. Obviously, China's going to consume more. I mean, their population is substantially larger than what of ours or anybody else's, in the world, as a matter of fact. But I think this might get to that point where we're finally going to reach a point where cattle prices and commodity prices kind of even out, because usually you have either commodity prices are super high and cattle's really cheap, because it costs so much to feed a cattle, feed a cow. So in order to buy one, I got to get it cheap. And, but if we can open that up where we're exporting that more, I think it's a win-win for everybody.
I think you're right. And I know you're right. And I think our exports will continue to increase on that beef side.
Yeah.
As well as on the grain side. But, I talked to a chartist the other day, and, your theory that you just stated totally matched what the chartist said the other day. So
I'm smart sometimes.
Chris, I'm really shocked. Is it Wednesday?
Well, first time having a blooper or an incident, I guess. We actually recorded long enough that we ran out of recording space, and so we had to take a little break. And
we did, and you know, part of that was me being a little breezy on a breezy day. You know, trying to compliment my associate.
No,
here.
I think you can keep the compliments coming if you want, but
I'll try.
all right. Well, let's move on to number 8. It's public scrutiny of livestock treatment, and obviously we touched on this a little bit. Well, actually, a lot of it. You know, in depth on our show last week with the Fair Oaks dairy incident. Well, there's some more stuff that has come up, but we're going to read what they say and kind of take it from there. So, public scrutiny of livestock treatment, consumer demand, and regulatory insistence on a range of safeguards for raising livestock in ways deemed sustainable and humane are causing rapid changes in the food system. Large food companies and supermarket chains are phasing out the use of sow farrowing crates from their supply chains, and it goes on to talk about a few other things in there, but this is the hot point. And here locally we had a local calf ranch owned by Tools Dairy come up on animal abuse allegations just Monday, Tuesday, I believe it was.
Yep, just right down the road from us.
excuse me. But yeah, so we're going to read the report, or what the investigator found there, and let's talk about it a little bit and kind of go from there. So it just says here, among the cruelty witnessed, our investigator found workers shoving, jabbing, and hitting calves with sorting sticks and hot rods, painful disbudding of calves using hot irons, calves dying of scours pre-pneumonia after being left outdoors in freezing temperatures, hernia repair, banding, and other painful procedures without pain medication. That was from Animal Equality. Now, there was a response provided to News Channel Nebraska. Summit Calf Ranch owner Todd Tools said the animal welfare is the highest of priority at Tools Dairy, and this past winter provided some of the most challenging weather condition in decades. In spite of these difficult circumstances, this video shows workers handling animals in a way that indicates they were attentive and following proper guidelines in their treatment. So, you know, we talked about this a little bit last week, and the fact that if you're not there, you're not living it. A lot of cases you don't understand. I grew up on a farm and a ranch. I helped my uncle and my aunt at their dairy. Now, unfortunately, there is a certain level of force that you do have to use to move them. They're 1,300 pound cattle.
Heavy animals.
And you got to move them along to do it. And that's a fact. That's no different than some horses. That's no different than hogs or goats or anything like that. It's
livestock.
It's part of the livestock way, other than maybe a chicken where you can pick a chicken up and walk it over, right? But I think a lot of these organizations are people in suits that don't understand what goes on in rural America.
Yeah, you've got to consider the source or sources.
Right, and this feels, now, I've actually tried to reach out to Todd Tools and Tools Dairy to get their side of it. I know we're not, you know, super big or famous or anything where it might warrant a call back, but hey, I'm going to try.
Not so much.
You know, and get their side of it, because to me, reading everything that I've read, and then following some of the comments on social media and stuff, that people who either work there or, you know that family, you know, directly, have classified it as a witch hunt.
Right.
And that kind of seems like the trend, because there's one bad apple, all must be doing it. And then we talked about that the last time. And unfortunately, that's just not the case.
It seems like that happens in so many organizations around the country.
Yeah.
That, you know, I don't need to repeat it, but I mean, it does. And,
yeah.
And, you know, we need to focus more on the good.
Yeah.
Of what's happening in organizations and
right,
and
absolutely,
and how things are rolling.
Well, they have over 10,000 head of cattle, right?
Right.
How many people do they employ?
I'm not sure.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know either.
I know it's quite a staggering number.
It's more than one or two,
yeah.
And they're in Nebraska, they're in Wisconsin, and they're in Kansas. So they have 3 states that they are providing to the economic growth of that that geographical area.
You know, and sometimes you can do all the training in the world, and some of those things are out of your control as well. You know, it's just one thing that you've got to constantly educate your employees on, and I'm sure they'll do that.
Yeah, and in reading this article and doing a little research on the animal equality company that did this, they're basically wanting end users, you know, that don't go to the store and buy milk, go buy almond milk, or, you know, don't buy eggs, buy, you know, simulated eggs, stuff like that. You know, so they're wanting the consumer to put a stronghold on these companies. Well, unfortunately, that's gonna do way more damage to the economy than anything else.
That's correct, because it is our end user.
Yeah.
That drives the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on here, I guess. Number 9, environmentalism influence growth. Grows.
Yeah.
From fertilizer to pesticides, farmers have to be mindful of a complex growing web of regulations. One of the fiercest battles in the Chesapeake Bay area watershed. A judge ruled in federal district court that an agreement between Environmental Protection Agency and 6 states to implement a total maximum daily load of pollutants filled within the framework of the Clean Water Act. Farm groups have sued to try to stop implementation of the 2011 agreement and warn that they will be that ruling will have implications nationwide. Tell me a little about it. What's your thoughts?
I don't know. Do you have some written fact? I think some of it's kind of going overboard.
Yeah.
I really do. I think there are ways that our end users and some of our companies are really trying to prevent some of this stuff from happening.
Yeah.
That's not being publicized.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, some of that's by you know, natural remedies.
Yeah.
So to speak, to combat some of the issues that you just discussed in this point. And I guess my point is, I think some of this gets blown out.
Yeah.
And I don't need to repeat myself, but you know, I guess, what are your views?
Well, obviously, anything that you can do to protect the environment is good, but we've reached a point in society where you have to do a lot of research to actually understand what's real and what's not. You know, it's not, you can't take anything for a grain of salt, or can't take anything as its legitimacy just by reading it. You need to do your own fact-finding stuff. And you know what? If this is, I don't really know enough on this subject. If it's a good thing, great, I'm all for it. If at the end of the day it hurts our producers and our growing seasons and that kind of stuff, well, then maybe we need to relook at it and figure out a solution that does work.
Well, again, I think we need to, I mean, I agree to a lot of your points there. But you know, then again, I think we need to rely on some of our professionals that are trying to combat some of the issues at hand. And I mean, they are addressing the environment, but at the same time, trying to keep up with production in normal everyday business life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are solutions out there, but maybe not the solutions at hand that the suits are recommending.
Right. Absolutely. Well, good enough here. Let's move on to number 10. Government policy in flux. Successive administrations in the U.S. and other countries have established approaches to land use, biofuels, GMOs, and monetary policy that seem likely to continue. The biggest change... Had somebody buzz us on a motorcycle there, huh?
They did it on purpose.
Nice day to be out riding.
See us at hand.
But the biggest change is likely to occur in China, and we touched on this earlier, which is solely embracing GMOs. Chinese acceptance of GMOs and for domestic crops would go a long way towards maintaining self-sufficiency and potentially turn the country into a net exporter. I don't know if I quite would go that far for them to be a net exporter.
That's a little down the road.
Can they move themselves into a situation where they can be more self-sustainable? Yes, absolutely they can. But there's no way, not in any time soon, will they be able to produce the type of crops that they need and the amount that they need in order to be self-sufficient.
And I think the U.S. and I hope the U.S. has learned their lesson in this conversation, and I think they have, because I think in order for them to be a net exporter, the U.S. would have to teach them what to do.
Right.
And we have taught other countries what to do. The U.S. has, and it has, in the long run, it has hurt the exports.
Yeah.
And I've not only do I believe in that, but I've heard that from other end users as well.
Yeah.
And you know, at hand, I think that's a long ways off. If that ever happens.
Yeah, maybe in my lifetime. I don't know about yours.
Yeah, because I'm old.
Yeah. So, well, cool. I guess that's it. We touched all 10 subjects and hopefully gave good, honest, solid opinions. And
I guess these are very solid points, Chris. Yeah. I'm glad you did the research on this podcast anyway. You know, it's nice to see you put a little work into it.
There you go.
You betcha.
I'm more than a pretty face.
But no, my point to this is all of these are valid points. People, end users, businesses, do your research. Yep. Use your professionals the way you should use them. It'll save you money in the long run. It'll make you more money in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. One last thing, our viewers, our listeners, find us on Facebook at The Dirt Exchange. We're on Spotify and iTunes under The Dirt Exchange Podcast, and also, of course, YouTube
and the tube
as well. Yep, so look us up, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Please, we might have some cool stuff coming out here soon.
Please do it, and we'll make it work.
Yep, that's a wrap. Thank you, sir.
Good to see you again.